Hello and welcome into the KE Report. I'm your host, Shad Markwitz, and today we're getting an update from our friend and colleague, Erik Wetterling. Erik Wetterling is known as the Hedgeless Horseman and runs the Hedgeless Horseman website, which we will put a link to down below in the show notes. And Erik, it's always great having you on the KE Report just to get an update on what you're looking at for investing in the resource sector. You and I and about 1,700 other investors were just attending last week the Precious Metal Summit in Beaver Creek, Colorado. And it was a wild week. We came into the week with gold and silver pressing higher and at all-time highs. There was a pretty big uplift in the sentiment at the convention. It's honestly the most bullish I've seen a convention, and I've been to 7 this year, but in years I've never seen people this bullish on the market, but rightly so. What were your key takeaways after a week in Beaver Creek talking to all kinds of different fund managers, companies, and investors?
Yeah, I mean, it for sure felt different than the time I was there 2 years ago. You could hear a lot of laughs, CEOs who were more, let's say, optimistic and cheerful than I've seen them in a long time. And I remember yeah, 2 years ago where a lot of the juniors were, basically lambasting the fact that, there's no money, we can't do anything, we have almost no news. Hey, we're doing a financing, could you help out? Do you want in? I mean, everybody's kind of begging for money while the news flow was relatively poor because of the lack of money to do anything with. And now you see, yeah, quite a bit of partying and all that. At the same time, I would still say, especially in the junior sector, maybe that there's some sort of wall of worry yet to climb. I talked to some companies where they had quite a few investors, maybe mostly retail, who said I'm afraid we're near the end of this because of course nobody has, well, since 2020 basically up to earlier this year, or actually last year, all the rallies were kind of, I mean, what came after every rally was almost a new low every single time, except for the real outperformers, usually discovery stories. So, I mean, everybody's been burned for 4 years leading up to this. So I think a lot of people are paranoid and have PTSD that, hey, this is going to lead to a disappointment again. And of course, I think that also makes everyone super sensitive to every retracement going forward, because they think it's too good to be true. And as soon as something starts to correct, I think there's going to be I think the corrections could be quite deep because the sentiment could just flip in a short amount of time. But also, I would say that even now, you know this better than me, that the large producers, they've been doing well for quite some time. Now we're seeing the smaller producers and developers. I mean, many of them have just been ramping for the last few months, basically. And as we've talked about that, bird in the hand has been so cheap that it didn't make that much sense typically to go into these early stage exploration story, for example. But now, as proven success is starting to revalue, I think there's a lot of them that are still cheap. Some are maybe not that cheap anymore, but it's like, as a guy who usually has been about exploration, I'm starting to feel good about some exploration stories here, because they've simply not participated. So I mean, they're at the way end of the risk curve where most of what they have, the value proposition, is risk adjusted. So it's all about potential. They of course are the ones who get slaughtered the most, the ones who only have potential, because during the depths of the bear market, anything that is risk is discounted hard. Even the ones that not maybe have that much risk, they even get discounted. But they're also the ones where, when they start to move and people are looking for excuses to buy, people are looking for upside risk, those are the ones that can, from bottom to top, move the most. And I mean, for better or worse, because they're also gonna get overvalued at some point in time. But I'm yeah, as one who actually likes exploration, let's say, I'm more positively looking at some exploration stories, because now all of a sudden it is starting to make sense to do exploration, because you're seeing that the ones who have done exploration and found something, they're getting to higher and higher market cap. So now it's again starting to make sense to actually go out and look for these projects, whereas before they were selling below sunk costs. And I mean, if somebody said, "Hey, I'll give you 100 million and 7 years to find something, and after 7 years, you're gonna be valued at 100 million, which it costs to basically prove it up, and you had to be lucky to find something." That calculation made absolutely no sense. But now, if some stuff is up to 500 million and it costs you 100 million to prove up, I mean, then it's starting to make sense.
Yeah, I think it's a great point because when we were talking last year, the message was like, why in the world would you not want to be in some of these producers or some of these developers that have sunk cost and ounces in the ground because they're so undervalued compared to the metals price. But over the last year and a half, a lot of those have caught up. And when you look at some of these companies up 2x, 3x, 5x, there has been a revaluation in both the revenue generating companies, but also the optionality plays, the beta plays. We were talking a year ago about how attractive they look. Well, now they've moved. So now it's the alpha plays, the companies that have a catalyst, the companies that have raised money finally, and then they are going out and doing a work program. It's now their time to shine. So when you look across the crop of explorers, and when you're at the convention, did you notice that there was one group that has raised money? Maybe they got a little sniff of something or a couple good drill hits, and so they're running. But there's also those other companies that surprisingly haven't really started running that much yet. Are you still encouraged by those that haven't run because you feel like the catalyst in front of them, or do you feel like some of these companies are separating because there's something wrong with them?
No, I for sure know some that I would consider some of the highest quality exploration plays that really haven't moved much at all. And I think they were even cheap, potentially relative to some development plays like a year ago. So I think it's just where the who gets most eyes on them, let's say, who gets maybe pumped more than others. But I am also starting to see that some of these exploration stories, when they hit nowadays, I mean, they're starting to get more traction, which again shows that people are willing to take on some exploration risk. And as always, I mean, people flood to what is called working. So if people see some exploration stories start to get traction from their actual drilling success, I mean, then they're going to start to believe and dare to buy something else that's exploring. So I think, again, that it's starting to spread in a sense to the exploration space. And of course, sooner or later, when it's getting hard, maybe to call some of these development places that are really cheap, I think it's going to start to trickle down as well. Because I mean, some of these producers, developers, they've been on absolute tear, and maybe that's for a good reason that they should go up that much. So they were that cheap, but I mean, when they're starting to get fairly valued, let's say, and you start to having to see a higher and higher gold price and silver price, then the risk reward obviously becomes, worse. And all of a sudden, you find yourself to looking for, what's out there that's still cheap. I mean, it starts with the majors, then I guess goes to the smaller producers and developers. And again, at the end of it, it's the exploration juniors. And I mean, I put out a chart sometime where it's like at the depths, for example. I mean, diversification and beta risk was at its peak, and as you know better than me, I mean, many of those plays have, yeah, been on absolute tears lately. And now, I mean, are all of them no-brainers still? Maybe not. And then it's like, yeah, where are you going to find, the best risk reward? So, I mean, I do think, as we've talked about a bunch of times, that I've never seen the developers or producers have that kind of absurd risk reward that they were literally ignoring the price of gold. Well, they aren't really ignoring it anymore. And you're starting to see some of these plays, I mean, can go up 10, 20, 30% on a day without news. I mean, that's obviously sentiment. So when you're starting to see that, it means sentiment is absolutely getting better. And I don't necessarily, I'm used to catching falling knives and misery. When I see that stuff, it sure tells you that, yes, sentiment is increasing, but it's no time forgo discipline, I was going to say. I mean, I prefer obviously that to see companies go up on news, not just a change in sentiment, even though when they are that cheap, they should go up on nothing really. But it is sentiment that's going to take them up. It's just that, yes, at the highs and all that, it's also sentiment, but it just makes them potentially overvalued. So, I mean, I'm looking for, as always, a lot of margin of safety in a sense. I mean, I don't want to be precise. I don't want to buy something that's like, oh, it's fairly valued at today's gold price. But if gold goes to 4,500, or if something goes exactly right, then I'll make some money. I mean, that's not enough, yeah, marginal safety. It's like it needs me to be accurate. So I just go to where I think the best risk reward opportunities are. And I'm not saying the developers or producers are cells. It's just that obviously risk reward changes if silver, yes, goes up $5, but let's say some silver developers go up 500%.
I think it's a good point that some of this movement we're seeing on a daily basis isn't news flow related, it's sentiment related, but sentiment follows price every time. And we had talked for a long time on here with you that eventually the sentiment would turn. And when it turned, we didn't know when it was going to happen. It would quickly start catching up to price. And that's what we've seen in a lot of maybe the more followed names, but it's now starting to trickle down into companies that are using a sniper approach to really go after some exciting drill targets, and then maybe they get the bid next. The other thing that's a big takeaway from Beaver Creek every time is that out of that conference and the Denver Gold Forum that follows it, we'll usually see some M&A. And we did come into the conference with maybe one of the bigger deals. I don't think anybody was expecting this, but you had Anglo and Teck sewing up a large base metals merger. So that got the animal spirits going even more. There were a few other whispers of other M&A deals, but one of the companies that you and I both follow that was not at the conference because we knew that something was cooking, and it started off this week with an M&A press release, was on the 15th on Monday. First Nordic Metals announced that they were going to be merging with Mawson. And so this is creating a Scandinavian powerhouse between both Sweden and Finland. So when you have the Barsele asset that's anchoring First Nordic Metals, and then you have the Rajapalot property in Finland that Mawson has, those coming together, not to mention both belts, the Swedish belt and the Finland belt. And so all these opportunities. What did you think of this deal as someone that I know follows the company closely? And hey, the reason they weren't there is because this big M&A deal was getting ready to be hatched.
Right. I mean, it's kind of unusual that if you have, let's say, a deal like that, you would think that it would get, published before the conference, but I guess they weren't simply done with it. So it's one of the more material news items to hit my portfolio, and it was actually released immediately after the conference. So that's, a bit surprising, I guess. And no, I mean, I like the fact that, some of the backers of Mawson Finland, and that's a spun out company from Mawson Gold that is now known as Southern Cross. So, I mean, you have Darren Morecombe, for example, who's the main backer, both behind Southern Cross and Foreign Mining, for example. I mean, those are two $1.7 billion companies. So this guy obviously is going for big wins. Seems to be very, very good at, let's say, creating a company. It's like a company builder. And also you have Nora, who's with Mawson Finland, who I have heard is the best permitter in all of the Nordics, basically. And of course, those two flagship projects being Barsele and Rajapalot, they're, pretty advanced. I mean, Rajapalot has a PA on it, so you're getting that scale. But I'm very excited about, getting these types of people involved. I mean, I'm pretty sure. I don't know if it's, out in the presentation, but I think Pierre Lassonde, for example, is an investor in Mawson Finland. So, I mean, getting that caliber people is like that's a vote of confidence, obviously, on the asset base that First Nordic has. And they're also bringing in new management, which has like multi-billion-dollar success. One of them was CEO of Norilsk Nickel, for example, which is obviously probably one of the larger mining companies in the world, I would think. After his company or their company, Lion Ore, got acquired for around 7 billion. So you have veteran mine builders and mine operators getting in. And of course, I would assume that they got the green light from these new backers coming in from Mawson. So it's like they also have third-party validation. So it's going to be almost a completely new company in a sense, and they're obviously going to be bigger. And if when this race goes through, they will have around 50 million. And I would also think that the rationale is that, okay, this makes it, easier to, let's say, negotiate with Agnico about Barsele, because I don't think this deal would happen if let's say the ones getting in or the smaller company doesn't think that, hey, there, higher chance that we're going to get Barcelona as well. Because I would think that Barcelona is a bigger, better project than Rayapalot. But I know more about Barcelona, so maybe that's my bias shining through. But that makes sense to me that, okay, if they want to make a $1 billion+ story, maybe they feel like, hey, we need a project like Barcelona and the goal line belt to come into this. So I mean, I'm hoping obviously that this deal goes through. They have that amount of cash, and that the longer term picture is going to be to being able to acquire a Barcelona, and then who knows, maybe put both these projects into production, and maybe even going beyond that and aiming to become a mid-tier or something.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think there's a lot of chatter right now in the different forums about what the angle could be here to merge these two companies and if it gives them a leveraging point to negotiate with Agnico, if Agnico's more interested in Finland versus Sweden, or if they're trying to build two projects and just mass up to get more eyeballs, better cost of capital, more liquidity. So it's going to be interesting to see, and we'll try to get the company on the show soon just to get an update there. But just knew it would be on your radar screen, and it's nice to see some M&A coming out of the conference, even if it's from a company that wasn't at the conference, and that's why. But hopefully we'll see a string of more M&A and get the juices going even more. Definitely the sentiment is picking up in the precious metal sector and really in the resource sector. It's tying into critical minerals companies as well, and even some of the energy companies. So nice to see people making money and some green on the screen. Nice to have a positive conference. And hey, it was nice to see in person, man. But always great to have you on the show, Erik. And for those that are interested in following along with the companies on Erik's radar and what he's writing about, definitely click on the link down in the show notes. It takes you right over to thehedgelesshorseman.com, where you can follow along with not just what he writes about, but also the videos he makes on YouTube. Erik, thanks for being on the KE Report. And as always, looking forward to our next conversation.
Thanks, Chad, and as always, nice to see you there as well. And yeah, consider me biased. I own a lot of shares of First Nordic, and if I mention any other company, consider me biased.